What happens when you give a min-maxing gamer a 1,000-year lifespan? He doesn't just play the game. He breaks the progression system entirely. In a forest clearing thick with damp earth and the very immediate promise of death, 3 absolutely massive muscle wolves have locked on, glowing yellow eyes tracking their prey while their roars shake literal dust up off the ground. Standing dead center of this disaster, not running, not screaming, just standing, is a spiky blonde elf boy, head bowed so low his hair masks his eyes in what might be the most dramatically deliberate pause in recorded fiction, gaze drifting to the devastating sight of several children lying motionless in the grass below. One pink-haired girl is barely clinging to life, eyes wide and trembling, fingers clawing at the grass for any kind of anchor, while a bald, scar-faced man watches the kid with his jaw physically on the floor. Then, the boy lifts his head, teal eyes blazing with a supernatural, otherworldly glow that cuts straight through the forest dark, squares up against the shadow wolf pack with clenched fists and radiates enough concentrated magical energy to make the whole clearing feel small. Because this is no ordinary elf kid. Cue the flashback. A rainy night in modern Japan tears into frame, bystanders screaming for an ambulance, another voice frantically commanding someone to make the call, a crowd pointing at the ground near an idling car. On the wet asphalt, a plastic ID card lies face up, rain pelting the portrait of a suited man, name reading Minoru Kido. And that man is nearby, dark hair plastered to his forehead, barely gasping, his brain finally catching up to the obvious conclusion that, yes, he is genuinely going to die on this crosswalk. He reaches one trembling hand toward the blinding white street lamp, and his final inventory check comes up catastrophically empty. 30 years, no friends, no family, nothing that outlasted him. A clear plastic umbrella lies upside down a few feet away, collecting rainwater like a monument to wasted potential. He lies curled on his side on the striped white pavement, and his last coherent thought dissolves into soft white haze. New life, new world, new character screen. Forest canopy, broad green leaves catching clean light, a basket of oval fruits sitting on a checkered cloth, while a worried elven mother tries to get Dad's attention. Their 10-year-old son Liese wants to go forage in the woods by himself. Mom's pointed ear is literally twitching with anxiety, long blonde hair shifting as she turns. Dad, Klein, leans over the wooden walkway railing and asks the boy calmly if he'll really be okay out there, lists the dangers, and holds up 3 fingers, suggesting the kid should be closer to 30 before attempting a solo run. Then crouches down to make sure Lisa's actually meeting his eyes. Lisa's response? Puffed cheeks, confident outward gesture, and an assurance that the muscle wolves don't even show up this time of year. Mom does the standard maternal, but still. Klein backs her up, and then this miniature menace announces that the whole forest lifestyle has become simply too easy for him. Klein visibly short-circuits. His son's development is running ahead of every other elf kid, including the neighbor's child who couldn't even speak by age 10, while Mom strokes Liese's hair gently and admits she's worried he's growing up too fast. Liese pivots smoothly to an elf life expectancy lecture, 1,000 years. Because behind those teal eyes is the soul of a 30-year-old Japanese salaryman who got hit by a car and died, now reincarnated into the elven species. With a second life, he fully intends to optimize. The realization had flooded through him like a burst of white light. He doesn't know why it happened, but from the moment he understood his situation, the oath was made. I'll live my best life without regrets in this world. And so begins the most aggressively productive childhood on record. The montage. Baby Liese hauling himself upright on a wooden chair long before any elf infant should have the motor control. 10 years already burned through since that vow. while Klein screamed in disbelief off-panel. Toddler Liese hidden under a hooded cloak, absolutely destroying a tome. And now, cross-legged on the floor with a book open across his knees, running at full intensity. Lore segment. Elves live forever, and their relationship with time has understandably broken down as a result. Two elf women are chatting and working when one casually brings up something recent, and her friend cheerfully pinpoints it as 3 years ago. 3 years. Recent. The concept of time in this village is genuinely, structurally loose, and the environment enables it. The entire settlement wraps around Yggdrasil, the ancient world tree, shielded behind an imperceptible magical barrier that keeps disasters out and dangerous monsters nearly non-existent, while Yggdrasil's fruit grows rich and plentiful and serves as the community's main food source. Most elves born here will live their full 1,000 years without ever once seeing what's on the other side of the barrier. But the village's most restless resident has decided he is done with the comfort zone, and his parents are quietly devastated. Liese stands tall and addresses them with clear intent to leave, and right on cue, a gnarled wooden staff taps the doorway, and the patriarch shuffles in with a low chuckle. This is the ancient wise man who has seen everything and remains tired, and he notes immediately that Liese only learned to speak 5 years ago and is already looking past the tree line. Mom panics, steps forward, bows. The patriarch waves it off, noting that elves this curious about the outside world are genuinely rare. Liese's eyes go wide. Then, the patriarch's expression hardens, close up on one ancient shadowed eye, and he delivers it clean. It will be a precipitous path. He has been patriarch for 600 years, has watched most elves who left meet an early death, especially those who entangled themselves with humans. The outside world is dangerous, Liese. He stares at the boy and asks point blank whether, knowing all of that, the kid still wants to go. Liese's thoughts reach his parents, genuine, full gratitude, and then reach further. He doesn't want to spend 1,000 years inside a small world. I want to leave evidence that I lived in this world. He'll meet people, learn things, and live without a single regret. Mom folds. If his conviction is this real, she won't stand in his way. The patriarch sighs, pats the kid on the head, mutters something about a long-gone elf named Libe Roly, and grants conditional permission. Try to pass my exit examination, Liese Klein. Liese answers immediately. The terms, delivered plainly, reach the peak of elven recovery magic within 100 years. 100 years? Confirmed. The patriarch explains that the outside world requires the ability to protect yourself with your own magic, and passing the exam within the century earns the exit. Liese runs the math. A century sounds like forever, but it's 1/10 of an elf's lifespan, and agrees instantly. The patriarch delivers the final warning with full gravity. This exam cannot be approached casually, and that is absolutely not to be forgotten. A decade evaporates. Liese stands before the great progenitor tree, the ancient, towering centerpiece of the village, quietly beginning his incantation before throwing his arms wide and detonating the ultimate recovery spell. Ardor! Ribbons of blinding white light spiraling up into the canopy. The patriarch has stopped functioning entirely, jaw unhinged, sweat running, because what just happened is that the great progenitor tree, a tree that has survived over 1,000 years, has just been fully restored by magic, representing the acknowledged pinnacle of elven spellwork in 10 years instead of 100. The elder stares at the vast, impossible power sitting calmly in Liese's palm and loses it completely. Liese turns back with the serene smile of someone who started doing the reading before anyone suggested it, and the patriarch, haunted, asks when he even started. Liese does the mental math and lands on approximately age 5. The patriarch briefly ceases to exist as a functional entity. Here is how the training arc actually went. Back before any of this, young Liese had turned the village archives into his personal grind zone. First objective being a systematic magic stat build. He found human-authored manuals and read them from the top of a bookshelf and landed on the key piece of lore. Human magic power is largely locked in by age 20 because the frequency with which you release your magic is directly what drives its growth. So Liese pushed himself until his limbs were shaking and his vision was spinning from pure magical exhaustion. And at some point, his mother walked in and found him face down on the library floor in a deep nap, which the nearby elf women noted with the bemused calm of people who had adjusted their expectations. But Liesel's internal logic had already raced ahead. If humans cap at 20, an elf's centuries-long lifespan might allow for growth that doesn't stop for hundreds of years. Back in the present, he stands tall and states it outright. It's possible that my magic power will continue increasing until I become 300, while the patriarch trembles in the background. Then, Liese immediately pivots. The patriarch jumps, and Liese breaks down his research. Elven recovery magic, dwarven earth magic, demon magic. Every species has its locked school, but with enough study and training, crossing those locks should be theoretically possible. He asks if other type manuals exist anywhere in the archives, and the patriarch slumps. Do you really intend to acquire other magics? He confirms without hesitation and lays out his plan to spend every remaining exam year grinding every available magic tree. The patriarch reels, shouting at the sheer absurdity of an elf passionately cataloging every branch of magic in an era when the demons who originally developed most of it are long extinct. Then comes the sigh of a man fully out of counterarguments. He reaches into his robe and produces the silver key to the library's forbidden section, warning that mastering magic without natural aptitude is typically projected to take a century on its own. Liese sweats at the timeline, then recovers and bows with real energy, thanking the elder sincerely. The patriarch blinks as Liese snaps upright with a blazing aura and declares his absolute intent to reach the peak of every type of magic. The patriarch collapses over his own staff. Please do that in moderation. Another decade, another impossible benchmark cleared. Morning sun on the grand library building. The seasons cycling in a blur through a full 10 years of obsession. And somewhere under a lantern-lit tree outside, Liese is currently sitting atop a literal mountain of leather-bound magic volumes inside, looking satisfied and noting his next appointment is coming up. He strolls the corridors later with a casual whistle. By the time he hit 30, he had already worked through every branch of magic the archives contained, and now he's just browsing, genuinely curious what he'll find next. The patriarch, somewhere during this decade, surrendered entirely and handed full management of the library over to Liese, and now stands nearby, looking haggard and soaked in cold sweat, processing the reality that his protege has consumed a century's worth of forbidden knowledge in a fraction of the allotted time and used the silver key to its absolute limit. Liese spots the elder spacing out and calls him back to reality. The old man startles hard enough to nearly fumble everything in his arms before instinctively producing a towel. With 7 years left on the exam clock and the library essentially solved, Liese hoists himself onto a tree branch and considers the bigger picture. The elves' only real channel to the outside world runs through the House of Garlanda, a relationship established long ago by a handshake between a previous patriarch and a human lord. To fund his ongoing magic manual addiction, Liese had converted the forest's premium rare tree products into trading leverage, earning the current patriarch's blessing for the exchange. Memory surfaces. Grillet Garlanda, exhausted after a brutal training session, slumped on the ground and looking up at Liese with unfiltered admiration, a human warrior who freely admitted he couldn't keep pace with the elf's regime. Grillet had also shared something personal during those sessions, blushing as he described his plan to propose to his childhood sweetheart, and laughing with full energy, insisting his master had to meet her someday. Liese sits with that memory, unbothered by the time-lapse, until a carriage rolls down the dirt path. And he leans forward, immediately clocking that something about this arrival doesn't match. The man stepping out doesn't feel like Grelais at all. A young man, Gallius Garlanda, stands on the shaded path, looking around in confusion. Liese pops out from behind a tree and greets him with complete warmth. "It's been a long time, huh? What sort of magic manual did you bring this time?" And Gallius goes completely rigid, whispering, "Elves," like he's just confirmed the existence of a cryptid, then snapping into excitement to confirm they're real, exactly as his father described. Liese tilts his head at the word father. Gallius explains with visible enthusiasm. First time meeting, deeply honored, and introduces himself as Grinnell Garlanda's heir, noting that his father had spoken of Liese throughout Gallius's entire childhood. Liese's face shifts slightly. His internal sense of time and the external world are clearly not synced. Gallius's tone drops. His father wanted to come himself, but the years have worn him down. And so the eldest son was sent in his place. Liese listens carefully, then crouches, and asks the key question. When exactly did Grelais last make this trip? Gallius adjusts his glasses, thinks back to when his parents married, and reports. It was around 22 years ago. A shadow falls across Liese's face as he stares up at the sunlit sky, quietly computing that while he felt barely any time had passed, humans had been living, aging, and moving through entire decades. Gallius recoils when the next revelation lands. The elf has 7 years left before he even leaves the forest. Liese explains calmly that he long ago surpassed the age at which he existed as a human. If you do the math, I'm already 93 years old. He smiles and floats the idea of visiting the Garlanda estate once he's out, asking Gallius to pass the message to Grelais. Gallius lights back up immediately, stands momentarily overwhelmed, then reaches out and grabs Liese's hand in a firm, earnest handshake, certain his father will be glad to hear it. Liese stands on the path, arm raised high in a full wave as the carriage rolls away. Walking back through the trees, he turns his focus forward. As long as the patriarch's test is cleared, the reunions can happen on his own schedule. And that brings us to the session that changes everything. Back in the library building, in the early morning light, the silence cracks as a cascade of books falls from their shelves, and pages flutter everywhere, and Liese stands in the middle of the glorious chaos with his hands on his hips. With this, I won't be bored for what few years remain. He immediately squints at an archaic text, sorts through titles on the floor, flips through a legendary tale about a hero defeating a demon king, and files it under nursery stories with a flat expression, then digs through a sprawling pile of scrolls, while reflecting that demons have long been considered extinct before something small catches his eye. Buried in the pile is a tiny, heavily damaged book coated in dust. He peers at the worn spine and makes out recommended movement magics. Later, at his desk, surrounded by towers of ancient volumes, Liese frames his next objective. I, who acquired all types of magic, finally set out to acquire ancient magic as well. He reflects on the demi-humans who once wielded this school, and the demons who used it to reshape the world. This magic operates on completely different principles from the standard 4 types. Special invocation conditions, some spells taking months or years just to parse. But Liese finds he can actually read them. The energy shifts. He thrusts the book at the ceiling, walks to the center of the library, identifies a modest test target near the house, and studies the ancient rune layout on the weathered pages one last time. He gathers his mana and shouts the ancient incantation. Bisendal! A glowing magic circle erupts at his back, and the power seizes his whole body. And he has roughly half a second to process that he absolutely nailed an ancient spell chant on the first attempt before the world blinks out and a book drops softly onto the empty rug where he was standing. He's face up on a forest floor, staring at the canopy with zero orientation. A muscle wolf immediately closes the gap with a roar. The metallic smell of blood hitting him sharp and fast, and Lee snaps upright and runs. From somewhere in the chaos, a bald, scar-faced man is screaming at him. Where did he come from? Is he with the guild? Lee slows, looks over his shoulder, and is genuinely confused. He takes stock. Muscle wolves, snarling, circling humans. The movement magic clearly worked. But did he just punch through the village barrier entirely? Then his gaze drops to a slumped shape in the dirt. A human child. Her fingers twitch faintly, weakly clawing at the ground. She's alive. Liese straightens up. Every stat maxed, 2 lifetimes of accumulated experience converging on a single moment. A chance encounter with a human. Liese Klein stands in a sun-dappled forest clearing, magical tome open, mid-incantation, looking like a man who just fast-traveled into the wrong zone, because his brand-new movement spell has dumped him entirely outside Yggdrasil's concealment barrier. He sweeps the perimeter, clocking immediately a sweaty, aggressive man. Let's call him Slave Boss, jabbing a shaking finger at the intruder, while a muscle wolf materializes behind Liese with dripping fangs, and 2 more crash out of the brush to complete the welcome committee. His fist tightens as it registers, small, battered bodies on the dirt, one with a metal collar locked at her throat. Then, a faint twitch. She's alive. Slave Boss curses his rotten luck. In the same breath, he calls the kids merchandise. And Liese repeats the word back, completely flat. Merchandise? Liese Klein. A muscle wolf lunges on cue. The whole crew of goons collapses into screaming chaos, and Slave Boss, demonstrating leadership of the highest order, shoves past his own men to flee. Liese lets them. Bait is bait, but makes his intentions immediately clear. He manifests a sphere of dark energy in his palm and drops the shadow spell, Black Whip, tendrils erupting through the tree line and lashing every traitor into immobility like living flypaper. With the goons handled, he wheels back. Another wolf lunges immediately, and Liese channels mana into his arm without flinching, activating a Beastman hardening enchant he has literally never tested on his own build before. The forearm crystallizes, he surges forward, and Beast Fist connects squarely with the wolf's snout, shockwave rippling outward, while the kid on the ground watches with the expression of someone who just saw a person punch a thunderstorm. Liese examines his own hands, genuinely surprised Beastman's strength buffs even translate to his race, and turns to the rest of the pack. The traitors, sticky and paralyzed, only now connect the pointed ears to the elf legends, but Liese has already moved on. He touches down and kneels at the girl's side, reading her shallow, rattling breaths, critical HP, internal clock ticking. He leans in, voice soft, tells her it'll be okay, then raises both hands and erupts a conflux spell. Grand Fire fused with recovery magic, Dragon's Healing Breath, which, from the outside, looks exactly like he is barbecuing a child. It is not that. The fire pours into her instead, absorbed completely, the spell resolving with terrifying speed. A small hand presses into the grass to brace. Minoru sits up, dazed, collar still locked at her throat, and Liese stares with the focus of a post-battle loot assessment. Slave Boss, dangling in shadow flypaper, is having a medical event. Minoru blinks up. Liese leans closer and immediately IDs the collar. Sealing magic, voice suppression, with a detonation trigger for unauthorized removal, because someone actually engineered a self-destruct into a slave collar. He tells her to hang in there. Minori clutches her hands to her chest and hopes. Liese threads destruction magic through the lock with surgical precision. The mechanism snaps, and he flings the collar skyward with a single shout to throw it before it explodes, which pays off exactly on schedule. As the thing detonates somewhere over the canopy, Minori breathes, possibly for the first time today, still in that same forest clearing, with 3 shadow-taped traitors on the ground and a girl who just got her voice back. Slave Boss wastes no time trying to work an angle. Liese stands over all of them and opens the floor for business. The leader immediately launches into the most transparent cover story in recorded history. Something about protecting the kids, rotten luck, and magic beasts eating his team alive. Voice cracking into a genuine plea for help. Liese delivers the driest thank you in history. Slave Boss, riding that momentum, asks to be released. Liese's face goes cold. He straightens and confirms he is, in fact, an elf, which detonates what little composure the bandana guy had left. Liese tilts his head, pointed ear front and center, and explains that elven hearing is not decorative, and that he has caught every word. He holds up 3 fingers. Question 1, who are they? Question 2, what are they running from? The traitors sweat through their restraints. Question 3, why were small children hauled through a monster-dense forest? Slave Boss cracks immediately. Hands raised as far as the shadow magic allows, and everything spills out in one panicked rush. Hired slave traders, parents who sell kids when cash runs dry, a guild contact who set them up and sent pursuers after them. They cut through the forest just to shake their tail. Liese narrows his eyes. The part of him that used to be human notes that people have always been exactly this bad, regardless of which world you're standing in. His old mentor surfaces in memory. Hooded, stern, warning that humans are ferocious, savage, and sneaky, and that a sensible elf doesn't forget it. Slave Boss, oblivious to the philosophical detour happening 3 feet above his head, demands the spell come off. Liese, recalling the Patriarch's standing directive about not getting too deeply involved with humans, raises a hand that has begun to glow with soft, humming energy. Slave Boss barely gets a confused protest out before the memory alteration spell, memory burial, resolves with a clean whoosh of displaced air, and every last traitor slumps into instant, dreamless sleep. Liese surveys the pile, completely unbothered, and adjusts his cloak. He turns to find Minori watching him. He introduces himself. An elf, Klein's child, name of Liese. He tells her he's glad she can speak again. She immediately apologizes for the children she couldn't save, and Liese sees the cross-shaped slave brand carved into her chest, a magic tool's permanent mark. The tears come fast. A flashback flickers through her. Younger Minori throwing herself in front of other kids and failing anyway. Liese says nothing, just watches. Then she looks up, jaw set, and says his magic was incredibly strong. I also want to be strong, Minori. She grabs his tunic with both hands. Please, take me with you, Minori. She immediately seems to realize how forward that was, and Liese watches her for a long moment, clearly tempted, before the logic catches up. I can't help you right now. I'm sorry. Minori flinches. I'm not human anymore. His lifespan runs 9 times longer than hers. His internal clock is a fundamentally different unit of measurement. 7 years is a Tuesday to him. Bringing her into that existence would just be quietly cruel. But he can't erase her memories either. He kneels and pulls her into a quiet, careful embrace. In the distance, guild investigators start shouting. There they are! Don't let them get away! And Liese decides the professionals can handle the cleanup. He vaults into the canopy and presses one hand against a massive trunk at the forest's edge. We will meet here again. Liese Klein. Behind him, Minori lies still on the forest floor in a gentle, magical sleep. Sunlight soft and unhurried across the silent clearing, cut back to a library floor and the slow accumulation of legend. Liese has heard rumors across the years of a girl who grew into a force of nature, the one who proclaimed herself the Nameless Woman, who racked up military feats that cleared whole battlefields, all while he was buried under precarious towers of ancient texts with a lantern burning low. Since I became an elf, 100 years have passed. Liese Klein. That admission surfaces from a memory of the patriarch showing up at his door, cautious, hooded, with an awkward apology for the intrusion. Liese had told him it was fine. The old elf sighed like a man watching the same unstoppable student for a century straight, noting that the mischievous child had always ended up right back here, his heart completely unwavering across the full 100 years of training. Elves are meant to live out their lives, spending their days in the village under Yggdrasil's protection. Patriarch. He gestured at a small bowl of seeds on the table as a metaphor for their sheltered existence, then painted a picture of what happens to an elf who steps outside the barrier alone. Baby mouse, open battlefield. He punctuated the point with a sharp, decisive gesture, flashed to the training grounds. Liese's hooded mentor leans in over the fire with a final challenge, and Liese plants his boots in the dirt and doesn't blink. Standing at the center of the arena, at the end of a 100-year grind, every stat maxed, every build optimized, 2 lifetimes of accumulated knowledge locked and loaded. He looks up at the sky and grins the grin of a man who just hit max level. And the game brain says the quiet part loud. Finally, the day has come. I've trained for 100 years until this day. Back in the ancient forest, Liese Klein sits on a weathered fence, cradling a basket of forest fruits, looking suspiciously at peace for someone about to blow up his own tranquility, which the narration immediately confirms is correct, since this reincarnated magic mastering elf is on a one-way track to becoming a living legend. The exam that closes out his century-long grind is today. The patriarch strolls over near the great gnarled elder tree and observes that even after 100 uninterrupted years of training, the kid's desire to bail on the ancient forest has never once wavered. Liese agrees. Then a voice drops in from nowhere. Liese spins, looking for the source, and the patriarch just deflates, explaining with tired dad energy that the rascal next to him has spent a century failing to beat him in training, which he finds deeply unsettling. The voice notes that permission after only a single century screams prodigy. The patriarch confirms it, adding that through this exam, the boy might finally grasp how far his own power actually goes. And then, before that sentence even lands, Rahab Lowry materializes mid-leap across the clearing at impossible speed, cloak mid-billow, and Liese genuinely has no idea where she came from. She introduces herself as Rahab Lowry, just under 6 centuries old, tells him to call her whatever he likes, and drives the crescent tip of her staff into the earth hard enough to split the ground. Liese's internal loading screen starts spinning. He knows this name. Some vision of a cloaked figure appearing to the ill and desperate snapping into focus, and while he's still stammering, Rahab muses that fruit being central to her legend is strangely appropriate. That's right, the legendary healer who treated the sick in exchange for rare fruit. Liese shouts like he just unlocked a secret achievement. She's the veteran from every book in the library, though he'd imagined someone significantly buffer and significantly less female. He doesn't get to update his mental model because she's already delivering exam terms. Survive until she runs out of magic attacking him. He echoes back. Survive? She confirms the terms are about as simple as it gets. Recovery magic is allowed. Then she slams her staff into the floor and blasts a shockwave of dust and leaves through the entire clearing, and adds, completely sincerely, I have spent 3 centuries training. I request that you do not go too hard on me. Lie files this under massive red flag and focuses. This exam is his official exit ticket, and his eye dilates the second the magical surge builds in the air. Rahab is already watching from behind her fan. He opens his mouth to say something cool. A glowing magic circle erupts beneath his feet. The forest floor tears itself apart. No chant. He's launched. Tumbling through the air, he manages to ID the spell. High-level earth magic. And Rahab names it like a menu item. Completely calm. Earthen Spear. Liese stares down in disbelief at the sheer audacity of the opening move, while his magic foundation creaks under the pressure. And he clocks the real problem. She committed to the attack before he even knew the exam had started. He barely drops into a defensive crouch when a horizontal energy beam carves the clearing clean in half, and he points out this is unfair. Rahab begins a lecture as the dust settles. She calls the outside world's inhabitants savage and sly, calls them cowardly beings, while magic pools at her staff tip. She explains she has often launched the next spell before the target even registers the first. The point, landing clean. You cannot survive just by talent. She underlines it with a volley of bursts tearing into the soil. Learn or don't leave. Then Liese fires back. Varling. Massive curved stone pillars detonate out of the earth and eat the next incoming hit. He announces the counter with full energy. Rahab tilts her head. She had the elf filed under recovery magic only and is now analyzing him with a gaze that could peel paint. Because I was human in my original world. Of course. Liese Klein. He pulls wind magic to his feet, calls Sylph, and launches himself vertical. Up there, he runs the combat math. Not the highest rank magic, but the chantless cadence makes it genuinely disgusting to play around. Dark orbs streak past, and he weaves through them, still annoyed at his own chant dependency. Cope later. Rahab taunts from below, warns the barrage is unceasing, and he'll run out of sky to retreat into. He leaps clear of an explosion, and then, mid-fight, totally unprompted, she asks why he actually wants to go outside the forest. He cannot believe she's asking that right now. She confirms she is asking that right now. He channels mana for a counterstrike, and starts talking anyway. He thinks about how long an elf actually lives. He says, probably the most chaotic possible way to open a heartfelt monologue, and then follows through. Flash to the elven village, peaceful, more so than anywhere else. One firm step forward. A century ago, when he was born into this body, every failure absorbed and converted into fuel, all of it aimed at leaving a mark on the world. Rahab listens, because in his past life, he never committed to anything. Never let anyone in. Died full of regret, and that's done. He clenches his fist. In this world, he'll know more than anyone, enjoy more than anyone, be remembered by others. Rahab smiles. He thinks back to years bent under a pillar of light in the ancient library. That is how I feel. Liese Klein. Rahab goes contemplative. She holds her fan to her face, and while rummaging through her travel bag, asks what brought her out there in the first place. He guesses fruit? She confirms. Wanted to eat a lot of tasty fruits. Liese's jaw unhinges. His whole world tilts. The legend of the great healer. In flashback, a young Rahab, 50 years deep on cuckoo fruit, finally snapping, deciding she needed variety, collapses into a comedy. 300 years of training, because she tried her hardest. The narrator charitably calls this her own reasons. Liese asks what happened to elves who left without training first. They were all engulfed by the waves of the world. Rahab Lowry. She explains she spent the following centuries acquiring the so-called evil magic of humans, which let her travel safely, taste fruit across countless regions, and genuinely enjoy the outside world more than she ever expected. But she pouts. Fruit quality has been declining lately. He responds. Flavor? In the background, the patriarch is peeking from behind a tree, visibly sweating through his robes. Rahab snaps back into exam mode, expression going sharp in real time, and announces the final phase with full gravity. All her remaining power right now. A massive multi-element torrent tears across the field. Liese rides wind magic through the gap, going offensive, hardening magic building, magic empowerment. Rahab braces, beast fist. Fist connects with her magical barrier, and it detonates into dark, crystalline fragments. Rahab bends down and picks one up, observes that he actually managed to destroy the material, and when Liese asks what that even was, with the staff in full view, she explains. A human-made magic stone, elemental charged, auto-casting on mana input. Liese does the math out loud. None of the magic she threw at him was actually hers. The chantless casting, all item-based. Even now, I cannot use any magic other than recovery magic. Rahab Lowry. Silence. She ran the whole fight on what she calls petty tricks, specifically engineered to shatter any kid who couldn't handle a real enemy. Liese has no words. Then she smiles. You passed. Congratulations, Rahab Lowry. He looks up, face still a little flushed, manages to get out, thank you, loses the thread completely and launches into a full hug, which Rahab receives like someone who has done this before. She pats him and says he tried his hardest, then, offhandedly, compares his power ceiling to that of a calamitous demon king. Liese, already in his traveler's cloak, is not entirely comfortable with that benchmark. But the sentry is done, the gate is open, and he walks out anyway. Cut to the outside world. A sweeping overhead shot of a packed town marketplace, stone streets crammed with dome-canopied stalls, multi-story balconies rising overhead, the whole scene buzzing with vendor calls and rattling carts. And right into frame, boots clicking clean on cobblestone, steps Liese Klein, open world, finally. Meanwhile, across the crowd, a female elf in form-fitting chest armor and a dark cloak cuts through the bustle with the purposeful stride of someone who has been here before and has exactly one goal, moving straight for a fruit stall. Where a middle-aged shopkeeper is mid-conversation with a bandana-wearing colleague, she arrives and quietly says, "Excuse me." The shopkeeper wheels around, puts on his professional welcome face, and then hears it. The rhythmic clink of a truly unreasonable pile of coins landing on his counter. The elf points at every piece of fruit in the stall. He stares, mouth hanging open. He recognizes her. Has she really come back to spend that much on fruit again? He tries to understand what possible motivation could drive this, and she gazes off into the middle distance and murmurs, quiet and melancholic, that she heard elves like fruit. He blinks. She waves it off and brings it back to the transaction. He sighs, concedes, turns to start bagging the entire stock in a daze, watching her over his shoulder the whole time, completely lost. She stands with her back to him, hair ribbon catching the breeze, eyes fixed past the crowd, with the 1,000-yard stare of someone waiting for a very specific person. And the narration frames the whole shot exactly for what it is, a prelude to reunion.